2 balls and 1 strike. Fastball in the outside corner. Strike 2. Taking time on the mound now, has the sign and winds up. And the 2-2 pitch, a curveball.
Welcome to the BBA Today, your podcast that covers events around the Brewster Baseball Association every day with your host, Yellow Springs 9 General Manager, Ron Collins. And now, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to episode 10, historic episode 10. We've hit double digits in the BBA Today podcast. I'm very excited about that. I am even more excited to tell you that I have with me today the Omaha Hawks General Manager, Justin Niles, and we are going to revive today our old This Week in the Brewster feature of 3 strikes and you're out. Justin, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to have some fun with me here.
Absolutely. This is something that I've really missed doing, and I think it's a very interesting piece for anybody that cares to listen.
Well, it may or may not be interesting, but it's a whole lot of fun for me, so what the heck. I think for those who are new to the league, this 3 strikes and you're out thing is that each one of us, myself and Justin, will bring in 3 topics of conversations or questions, and then at the end we'll end up posting a little poll, and everyone can tell us which one of us struck out and which one of us hit for strikes and which one of us missed the plate. So I think what we've decided is that I'm going to go ahead and throw out the first strike today, Justin. So my first strike focuses on Mark Simpson. Mark Simpson is off to a little bit of a slow start this year in Chicago. Still getting on base like mad. He's having a Mark Wareham kind of year with 239 batting average and a 417 on base clip. It all adds up to 1.2 WAR, so it's building up and building up. He is 33 years old right now, sitting at a career total of 66 WAR, which is projecting up towards 70 by year's end. We are hearing a lot of buzz about guys like Jared Gilstrom, obvious Hall of Famer, Dusty Rhodes, probable Hall of Famer. Even earlier in his career, Emilio Morales from your team. We're having lots of fun conversation about that. But Mark Simpson is kind of flying under the radar. So my question to you as my first strike is Mark Simpson a Hall of Famer?
Well, you know, the Hall of Fame to me is precious material, and I'm a huge advocate for a small hall. So of course your first question would have to do with the Hall of Fame. Looking first at his black and gray ink, both are falling short of the current Hall of Fame standards. But like you mentioned, he's only 33, so he probably has a couple years left. And a lot of that ink is also coming in from games started. He's quite a durable player. He led the league in games started and started all 162 of them multiple times so far in his career. His OPS plus and WRC plus are both really good. They're both essentially 40% better than the average hitter. And his WAR also indicates that, that 66 WAR is definitely impacted by that. But with him, he was no slouch with the glove either. He hasn't been a slouch with the glove. He's won 4 Gold Gloves. That, along with the 400 on base percentage, is really the deciding factor for me. I wish he was able to steal second a little more consistently, but I'm still putting him in the Hall of Fame. If his career ended today at age 33, I would put him in the Hall of Fame. But he probably has 4 or 5 years left. I'm not sure how productive of years, but if he's hitting at a 400 clip or on base percentage, they're going to be very productive years. To me, I think he's definitely a Hall of Famer. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's an interesting question because he doesn't get a whole lot of the ink that a lot of the other guys do. You laid out all the statistical numbers pretty well. He winds up at, let's say he winds up a little shy of 70 WAR this year. He continues to play a lot of it probably has to do with whether he regresses a whole lot toward the end of his career. Was it Valery Karmalov, for example, is a really interesting case because he's got a strong case, but his the taste that he left by sticking around for an extra 3 or 4 years when he wasn't anything near wasn't really a strong player. You wonder how much that has to do with the voting. So for me, he's kind of a enigma. I'm not sure whether I would I don't think that I would put him on right this minute, but he does have a couple of more years, and it will not surprise me to see his name on my ballot. But you seem to be. I'm interested. That's interesting. My strike one has you the small hall guy already saying Simpson is in. So my day is already made. What do you got for your strike one?
Well, so for my strike one, we're going to head to the to the top of the league, I guess you could say. We've heard nothing but Edmonton over the last few weeks talking about their projected win totals, despite having a worse team than prior years. According to Chris, I think at one point they were figuring to have 130 wins or something like that. Now we're just a few weeks later, and Louisville, a Heartland team, I must say, has passed them for the best record in the BBA with a 7.71 winning percentage. Who finishes with the better record between Edmonton and Louisville? And who actually has the superior team? We know that Louisville is probably going to win more games because they play in a very good Heartland division. But who actually has the better team? If they were both in the Heartland, or if Louisville wasn't in the Heartland, which one of these teams is superior?
Oh, Justin, you're going to do this to me. You're going to make me talk about either Edmonton, who ripped my heart out last year, or Loserville, who is just Loserville. I just can't believe that you're bringing this kind of strike in as our first. Oh my God. I think when I pull myself out of my shock and awe and pain and look at these two teams, I think that the big question here is probably really pitching. I don't really believe Chris when he starts talking about how poor his team is because, he's learning the reverse jinx from the master, Brett himself, or maybe he taught Brett and it's just kind of going back and forth. Edmonton's offense is about as elite as you can get. Donadoni is just adding fuel onto the fire there, but you can't look at a team with Stephen Collins and Menzies and so forth on the bats that they've got are just super elite, and that's why they're doing what they're doing in the weaker Johnson League as a whole, right? It pains me to absolutely no end, though, to look at Louisville and have to say that at this moment, I don't think that huge run that they're on is a pure element of luck. I mean, they have literally the absolute best outfield in the Brewster right now with Quaco and Borges in center field, who pushed Hubbard out of center field. That's just a flat out elite of the elite. Their pitching is young and strong. It's a little bit fragile, right? It seems like Shaw is constantly complaining about one of his young guys getting hurt, and I completely understand that. If I were so sad as to be an actual Loserville fan, I would be anxious every time one of those pitchers hits the mound. But I think Louisville, in my intellectual sense, as bereft as they are in ethics and morality and just pure stinkiness, I think Louisville is right now the best team in the Brewster when it comes right down to it, and I think they're showing it. I don't think it's even really close.
I agree 100%. I think that Louisville is not only the best team in the BBA, but I don't think Edmonton's a top 5 team in the BBA. So.
Ooh, shots fired. Let me throw out my strike two. Recently, I don't know if you saw this because a California news outlet put out a piece of news and they kind of buried the lead, but They have now released ex-Chicago general manager Vic Kaleka. Was let go by the California Crusaders, as buried as he was in their organization. Maybe that makes a difference, maybe it doesn't. But, at the end of the day, while a lot of people, I think, saw him as kind of this, when he was with Chicago, when he was the GM there, saw him as kind of this bumbling, inefficient kind of guy. But at least others said that, he could do the job. And, unlike, here's the interesting twist. Unlike some fans in Long Beach, where the Surfers right now are running in last place in the weakest Pacific division that we've seen in a long time. They're at 18-31, and a lot of Surfer fans are saying that Stephen Lane has got to go, that he's on the hot seat. So my question to you as Strike 2 is, what are your guesses for Vic Kaleka? Will Surfer owner O'Shea Jackson be giving the ex-tow trucker a call? Or will Vic Kaleka wind up trying to find employment in refuse transportation before it's all said and done?
Wow. So I did see all this, and I've kind of kept to myself on what I think is going to happen, but I'm gonna let it out there. I'm gonna blow your mind here. I'm calling a big conspiracy theory on this. I actually think Vic is going to wind up back in Chicago. I'm not convinced he ever was actually let go from duties there, and is actually a mole in these other teams. I think his departure from California, may have more to it as well than what's being let out. I personally think that he was sent around by Chicago, sent around the league to teams that are producing well and have built their squad up, and is actually reporting the news back to the Black Sox owner. Because as you see, Chicago's been sort of struggling this year. They were not great last year. I think that he has been sent around the league, and I think we're about to have a second Black Sox scandal in the world of baseball on the horizon here. I think Vic is going to be called out and caught one of these days, and I'm not sure that just as you described him. I think that's kind of how everybody sees him, as a bumbling, guy who knows nothing, that can wear a baseball cap, and that's about it.
But somehow Chicago still managed to be 500 with him.
Yeah, I think there's more to that. I think he has given some good information to Chicago that they wouldn't have without him.
Well, there you have it, a real tin hat conspiracy thing going on there. Benny Vitale in the seat right now. Rumors flying around her as being in some interesting situations with the owner, Vinny Vitale. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I hadn't really considered that. That's you heard it first here, fans.
I think that would be a huge news break for the BBA in general. So I hope that is a true story that's about to unfold. Let me toss my strike 2 at you here, and I can't believe that we're talking about this, but Rockville recently made an announcement that they would consider tearing it all down if a good enough offer came along for one of their players. I've been in the league since 2030, and Rockville has been very, very good, basically my entire tenure with the league. Let me ask, is now the time for Rockville to tear it down with the weak Atlantic division? Or should they actually be going for one last run just because of how weak the Atlantic is?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a really interesting question. I was shocked to see that that news roll out that Rockville would be interested in hearing offers on some of their players trying to make that decision. But on the other hand, a couple of things go together. First off, Aaron Weiner is really an amazing general manager when you watch what he does. I don't know how he does it most of the time, to be honest with you, but he has put together an amazing collection of baseball players over the years. And if you go back just before you rolled into the league as the Omaha general manager, Rockville had just come out of a rebuild, so Aaron really understands how to tear a team down and build it back up again. But that having been said, it's against that backdrop that I say the second piece going into this is, if you look at the Montreals and the Charm Cities and the Atlantic Cities. Those are three teams, for example, and Brooklyn is an interesting outlier. I'm not sure where Brooklyn is going to go, but they've got some really interesting players. Those three or maybe four teams, I think, could be building to a point where they're going to be pretty solid. And so if you're Aaron, the old caveat or old saw of, trade before players lose their value might be coming into play here. And the fact that Rockville's start for the first now 2 months is a sub 500 start. Add that all together, and I think that Aaron is playing this in exactly the right way, because I think he still has the horses to compete in the Atlantic, because it is not as strong as the Frontier. I think he's got the horses to compete, but he is not competing right now. So I think at the end of the day, if he gets the right package, that yes, it is time, but that package has got to be huge. And essentially give him a kind of a rocket start to a soft rebuild rather than a hard one. His last rebuild was a very hard rebuild. So I think that ultimately what he's doing right here, and it makes a whole lot of sense to me, is he's going to listen to people for about a month before trade deadline, and if he can get a big package with 4 or 5 valuable players with 1 or 2 real impact players, I think he would tear that down and make it happen. In 2 years, 3 years, he would be right back where he's at right now. That's my flavor. If he doesn't get that kind of package, then no, he shouldn't.
Yeah, and if I remember right, during the last offseason, he re-signed one of his pitchers. I don't remember if it was Cannon or not, but he signed him to a extremely backloaded deal. To where a very, very large chunk of money was on the last year of the deal. Right. And that kind of simplified and said, well, we know when the window for Rockville is closing. To me, if he were to trade, not necessarily Cannon, if that's who it was, but if he were to trade other players, he's still going to have to deal with that backloaded salary here in a couple of years, in a season that he was planning on potentially being a rebuild season, it appears. And so that's my concern, is that if he tears it down too early now, the rebuild is going to last too long.
Yeah, I think there's 2 different pieces of that, and it was Cannon that signed that huge deal. I think it's got 2 $30 million years at the end of it as player options. At least one of them is a player option. I can't remember whether the team option is the last one or not. I think 2 parts go into that. First off, if he's tearing it down and he trades Cannon, then it doesn't matter, right? Because then that contract is no longer on his register, and I doubt that he would eat salary to move players like this, but I don't know. The second piece is that Cannon is on his way at age. What is he? 33, 34. He's about ready to win his 4th straight Nebraska if he keeps pitching like this. So who knows how long he can keep pitching like this. And then the third piece to this is that if he gets a whole bunch of young players behind him, you can put a $30 million player onto a roster and not have any real impact if 12 of those players are impact Mensal players. So I don't think that one contract is a big problem when it comes right down to it.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. I can see that. I mean, there was a year, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, it was whatever year Morales made $35 million in 1 year, and we were able to bounce around, and that was the year we had a lot of our kids called up in Omaha, and so it wasn't a huge deal. But
yeah, so you've got to juggle the financial thing year by year. But Aaron is brilliant, and I think ultimately, if he can get the right package right now, that this is the time. But that's got to be a huge package, and if he doesn't get the huge package, then he's playing with house money right now. He'll keep going, and who knows, the team could get hot, and he could find himself in the playoffs again.
Absolutely.
So let me throw my third strikeout, strike 3 coming. You talked about Edmonton in one of your earlier ones, and actually I'm very interested in this because the consensus this year is San Antonio is finally for real. And in fact, they're kind of on a big run. They recently took 2 out of 3 from Edmonton that I know that Mike Calvaruso, the general manager there, was kind of edgy about and considering it to be a big week. Right now, San Antonio is down by, I think it's 6 or 7 games, 7 games to Edmonton. Looking at the schedule going forward, San Antonio has a softer June schedule than Edmonton does. And so I'm wondering whether you might see the Jackrabbits regress to mean after that really super hot start. I'm going to make you a buy or sell argument. And the buy or sell argument is that San Antonio sits at the top of the frontier by the All-Star break. What do you think?
7 games is a pretty large jump. So I mean, if you had said, maybe the month after the All-Star break, I would 1,000% buy this, but I'm still going to take a chance. I'm going to buy this. I think that in my media guide predictions, I had Edmonton failing to win 90 games this year and actually missing the playoffs. Despite the amazing start Edmonton has had, I still think they're going to miss the playoffs. I told you I didn't think they were a top 5 team in the BBA, and they have a really good offense, but I think they're going to miss the playoffs. Put me down for that 100%. Write it in ink. Do whatever you need to do. You take my blood if you need to. They're going to miss the playoffs. San Antonio, Mexico City, Las Vegas, Boise, and even Calgary are going to see to it that Edmonton is watching from the outside. The Frontier is just good. I mean, that is a good division. We talk about the Heartland being very good, and the Heartland is great. The Frontier is definitely the second best division in baseball. They're going to beat each other up enough where they could and likely are only going to see 2 of the 6 spots in the postseason going to the Frontier. And if that's the case, I'm taking San Antonio, and it's hard to bet against Las Vegas, but I would take Mexico City as the other representative.
Well, there you go. That's a pretty bold statement right there around Edmonton. And since Edmonton ripped my heart out and is wearing my 3rd ring, Jacksonville's wearing my first 2 rings, and Edmonton is wearing my 3rd. From an emotional point of view, I'm happy if that works out because Edmonton fans, oh God. Edmonton is becoming the Louisville of the Johnson in Ohio, right? I don't know if I can buy Edmonton completely out of the playoffs this year, just because they banked so many wins. It's going to be hard for them to go to 0, and I don't know that there's a lot of teams in the Atlantic that will go forward. But I could definitely see it. I mean, I think you're right. Top to bottom, the Frontier is a tough league, tough division. Wichita is proving to be a thorn in a lot of people's side too, so they could steal a few games from Edmonton going through it. A lot of it probably just depends on Edmonton's pitching. Their pitching is nowhere near where a couple of the other teams are. But obviously, I'm big on San Antonio right now. I've been watching them for a month or two and wondering how they were going to go, and they've done nothing but tell me that things are good for them. So if I'm going to jinx Mike here, if the Outlaws can avoid the injury bug, I think they're going to make some pretty big waves here this year.
Absolutely, yeah. That is. I wasn't going to mention that I think San Antonio has had pitching woes every year that I've been in the league just because of injuries. And so since you mentioned it, as long as they can stay healthy, I think that San Antonio is going to and I don't think that I don't think it's going to be San Antonio winning that division by 1 game. I think Edmonton's going to be at least 7 games back. I think it's going to be a complete 14-game swing.
Well, there you go. There you have it.
All right, let me toss you this strike and toss you out. Wilson Andrade is having a fantastic breakout season in Charm City. He had a pretty well covered 30-game hitting streak to start the season. Currently has a 4.26 batting average and finds himself in the top 10 in many offensive categories. He does, however, only have 8 home runs on the season and 33 RBI. Regardless of whether those stats matter or not, compared to WAR or win probability added or WRC, how much is this going to hurt any MVP chances he has when the league leaders have nearly 3 times as many home runs and twice as many RBI as Andrade?
Well, those are always interesting questions. I think, well, first off and foremost, Andrade is almost certainly the Puckett winner for shortstops, right? I mean, he's certainly got to be the leader as far as that goes. I don't think that lacking RBIs will hurt Wilson Andrade much at all. I think the league has pretty much gone past, for the most part, the RBI as a major player in making votes like the Sawyer Silk. The biggest problem that I think Wilson Andrade has in context of winning a Sawyer Silk is that he plays in the same league as Juan Rivera and Dennis French. As good as Andrade has been, Rivera, I think, if I'm remembering right, Rivera still leads the league in WAR and is just has no holes, right? And I know Dennis French has. French hit 340, and it was a slow month for him coming out of the gate. So ultimately the question when it comes right down to it is if you look at Andrade and let's say he hits 400, how much will people talk about a 400 hitter? And Andrade's got some power. I mean, I think he hit 20. I looked at it earlier today. I think he hit 21 home runs last year, so it's not like he's totally bereft of power. But the question is, let's say, does a 20 home run hitter who hits 400 get more votes than a 350 hitter who does 40, 45 home runs and slugs better? I think that'd be an interesting vote. I would absolutely love to see Andrade, Rivera, French, and the Italian all have mega seasons and see what that voting ends up looking like. So at the end of the day, I think lack of home runs will hurt Andrade a little bit in that race. Let's say all four of those have their absolute best peak season. Andrade's lack of home runs will hurt him a little bit. I don't think his lack of RBIs will hurt him at all. But at the end of the day, right now, I think this is Juan Rivera's award to lose when it comes right down to it.
Yep, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that it's home runs and RBI clearly do not matter to Silk winners because Morales led the league 5 times in each and took home 0, and so it doesn't matter. I think that this isn't going to hurt him as much as you mentioned. This is Juan Rivera's year to lose it if he's going to lose it. So.
It's probably the case for a couple of years. I mean, right this minute, let's take Rivera and French out of the equation, right? And you say Wilson Andrade and Larchibalde, the Italian. Let's say they both hit 400. Who wins over those two? Well, probably Andrade because Andrade is going to have quite a bit more power. I don't think the Italian will hit 20, 25 home runs. I think Andrade will. And so in that case, the lack of home runs would hurt the Italian a little bit. So home runs make a difference. It's just it makes a difference in the overall package of things, right? The difference between 20 home runs and 50 home runs is a pretty big deal. The difference between 50 home runs and 40 home runs is not nearly as big of a deal.
Absolutely. Nope, I couldn't agree more.
So right now, if I were to say it would be Rivera, French, and Andrade would be my guess is the order that they will finish in if they continue to play in the way that they're playing right now. But that, I could argue against it too. I'm never quite as bold in my answers as you are, Justin.
Well, I like upsetting people, I suppose, and I don't have very many trade partners left, and so what happens if I get 0? Oh well.
There you go. Alrighty, well, this is fun. We've each been through our 3 strikes. We'll get this packaged up and we'll put it out for the public to vote on and see if one of us struck out the other.
Sounds good.
Alrighty.
Look forward to it.
Fantastic. Thanks for your time, Justin. We definitely have to do this again. This is a lot of fun.
Thanks, Ron.
You've been listening to the BBA Today, a podcast that covers the Brewster Baseball Association every day. Music is Bold Statement, available at BesleyandStudios.com and use the attribution. Be safe and well, and we will hear you again tomorrow.